That's my intervention. We'll go now to Ms. May. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all members of the committee. And I hope we will be able to proceed with a number of critical issues. This is the ultimately most serious issue that I think I've faced as a member of Parliament. The notion that, and the evidence from the RCMP, that a foreign government has committed criminal acts on Canadian soil, including homicides, and that it particularly targets one community, the South Asian community within Canada. I am going to try, Mr. Chair, to be as concise as possible. As you, I can't say my name was taken in vain, because it's always an honor to be called out for being ineffective by the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. And I want to correct the record where I need to, but try to keep my comments fairly limited. I share with Ms. Landsman a sense that it was unfortunate that last night's emergency debate was unnecessarily, well, who can use the word necessary in terms of the hyper-partisanship we hear in Parliament. But to the extent that she mentioned that all parties got to speak, I did get to ask questions, but I didn't get a speaking slot. But I regret that last night's debate, not all members. I mean, I have to say Ruby Sahota's speech was excellent for Brampton North. There was an awful lot more partisanship than is appropriate, I think, when we're talking about an issue as grave as the emergency debate on the actions that the RCMP has alleged that the Indian government has coordinated against Canadians on Canadian soil. So to the extent that last night's debate may have been characterized as bringing more heat than light, in the time I have right now, Mr. Chair, I'm going to try to do the opposite and bring more light than heat. I'm going to start with the comments from Ms. Landsman, just because I think it's important to remember that words matter and respect matters. And when we're dealing with issues which are obviously bringing a great deal of emotion to the fore, Canadians want to see us speak respectfully of each other and of other Canadians. So I just, in reference to our former Governor General, the Right Honorable David Johnston, being referred to by Ms. Landsman as a quote-unquote family ski buddy of the Prime Minister, I just want to remind everyone that when David Johnston was appointed Governor General of Canada, that decision was made by our former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Stephen Harper. The decision and the appointment process for David Johnston as Governor General was at the time, and I recall it well, in 2010, extolled by many, because Stephen Harper made the decision to have an expert advisory panel to keep politics out of it and to appoint an eminent Canadian to the role of Governor General. So because I respect and admire David Johnston a great deal, even though I did vote that the special rapporteur role was not working, that he should resign, I had a hard time with that vote because of the depth of my personal, I'll admit it, deep personal affection and respect for David Johnston. But as former Governor General, he should not be referred to in any parliamentary proceeding as a quote-unquote family ski buddy. David Johnston served this country with extraordinary commitment and dedication, as did his wife during the time he was Governor General, and he continues to do so. Now, as his role as special rapporteur is directly of bearing on the motion before us from my colleague from Cowichan and Malahat Langford, who happens to also be a neighbor on Vancouver Island to Saanich Gulf Islands, there's no question but that leaders of opposition parties have never before had the right or the opportunity to ask for top secret security clearance. That opportunity was only created when David Johnston filed his report, which was not a Coles Note summary, but an effort to open up for more Canadians access to top secret information to understand the extent of foreign interference in our election process. So in his initial report, David Johnston said there are top secret security documents that he had read that he thought should be available to leaders of opposition parties if they were able to obtain top secret security clearance. I took that opportunity as quickly as possible, and so I had my top secret security clearance in the summer of 2023. And I think it's important for all leaders to have that, such that we can talk to each other without worrying that we're going to betray or violate what used to be called the Official Secrets Act, which is now the Security of Information Act. So again, I want to go to words matter and respect matters and continue along that. And just to respond to one of the other people Ms. Landsman mentioned, having denigrated our former Governor General, she praised to the skies Mr. Mulcair. Now, I also have a lot of respect for Mr. Mulcair, but his track record on words matter and respect matter isn't great. Back in 2005, the Quebec court found, and Mr. Justice Denis' decision was really hard to read if you want to respect an individual in public life. And I'm sure Mr. Mulcair would rather that he had not defamed a former member of the Parti Québécois cabinet, Mr. Duhaime. The language was found by Mr. Justice Denis that Mulcair used language that was imprudent, false, defamatory, malicious, and a number of other adjectives. So that was unfortunate. Lucky for Mr. Mulcair that the Quebec taxpayers paid the $95,000 judgment against him for having defamed the reputation of a former member of the Quebec cabinet. Moving on from there, I wanted to speak to some of the points that really, again, what language we use really matters here. So this goes to some of the points made by my friend, Ms. Dancho from Kildonan St. Paul's. I want to start with a bit of a short preamble. We've thrown around in debate members of all parties, and I'm not trying to find fault with anyone for using language that's imprecise. It's easy to use language that's imprecise. So we've variously referred to receiving briefings or taking an oath. I prefer to say that when you have top secret security clearance, you have access to read top secret security documents yourself. Now, to that extent, are you then muzzled? No. You can reflect, you can share, as I've tried to do. I've tried to, and it's Ms. Dancho was working from memory, and believe me, Raquel, I'm not saying a single thing in criticism of how you recalled what I'd said in press conferences. It was months ago, and I know there was it was best efforts to recall what I'd said, but I never said there were no worries about what occurred in Parliament. We know from the committee report, which gets called it's always a hard acronym to say, the NCI COP report, but the Committee of Parliamentarians on National Security and Foreign Interference. We know from that report that, and I read the unredacted version, so I read the secret report. We know from that report that there were, in the language used by the parliamentarians, witting and semi-witting participation by people who might be sitting members of parliament. It led to a great deal of speculation and the atmosphere that began to, I was worried it began to approach being a witch hunt of, are there traitors among us? I didn't say there were no worries. I think foreign interference is a significant worry. I think we need to pay a lot of attention to it. And that's why I continue to urge Mr. Poilievre to get his top secret security clearance, because we need to be a united front as Canadian parliamentarians. We need to put Canada first and be able to say to any foreign government that thinks it, or non-state actors as well, any foreign interest that thinks it could interfere with Canadian democracy or worse, commit criminal acts on Canadian soil, know that you do not find any daylight between us as leaders, that we stand together to say there's no room here for foreign interference. Where we have soft underbelly spots in how our own political parties may operate, we need to tighten those up. We need to make sure we pay attention to the two places that were found to have the greatest vulnerabilities: nomination races and leadership races. Those we could clean up, those we could stand together. But back to some of the comments Ms. Dancho made, I didn't say there were no worries. What I did say, and I want to repeat it so it's clear, because people variously said that I changed my story in some way. I have not. I am not muzzled. What I am is keenly aware that I can talk about what I've read as long as I don't violate the Security of Information Act. To violate the Security of Information Act is an offense for which you can be jailed. But more than that, and I have explained this before, not all information you read is of the same, runs the same risks to our security establishment. As Five Eyes partners, I certainly don't want Canadian security to be viewed as lax, such that other Five Eyes partners don't want to share information with us. That's why I completely agree with the findings of our former Governor General David Johnston, that it is significant, worrying, and unacceptable that anyone within our security establishment shared confidential and, in fact, privileged top secret information with journalists. That puts our security establishment in a position of being less trustworthy to other Five Eyes partners. I do think that David Johnston's report as special rapporteur was absolutely correct in that, not because I want to muzzle people or act out of partisan interest, but we have to ensure that down the line, those who have access to information which is top secret, protected by the Security of Information Act, do not feel that they can put, let's be clear, the Globe and Mail reporter who's got a great reputation, and for good reason, but Bob Fife can't be on speed dial to CSIS agents. And so we have another question today, which has just come up about the Washington Post. I'll turn to that in a moment because I think it's important and needs to be investigated. But this isn't about muzzling people. This is about, as parliamentarians who have taken an oath of loyalty to Canada, that includes the Constitution of Canada and the laws of Canada, you don't go around recklessly violating the Security of Information Act. So just to correct the record, I never had to check anything with the RCMP before I spoke. But because when you sit down to read a top secret security document, you're not allowed to take notes. You're not allowed to bring any electronic devices in the room with you. You just have to rely on your own mind, your own ability to assess information, to read and remember what you've read. So when I went in to read the top secret security cleared document, which was the unredacted report of our parliamentary committee that included members of the Liberal, New Democrat, Conservative Bloc party, as well as independent senators, the committee, NSICOP committee chaired by David McGuinty. When I went in to read that, the only thing I brought with me, again, no pen, no cell phones, no electronic devices of any kind. They're under lock and key outside the room. And the room is windowless, so no one can train a telephoto lens on what you're reading from another building across the street. What I had, and no staff, none of my staff. So the Privy Council office had someone there to keep an eye on me as I read. The only thing I was allowed to bring in with me was the redacted public version of the committee's report so that I could cross-reference back and forth to see, okay, the redacted version says over here at page 32, paragraph 72 has had a significant deletion where it refers to allegations of Indian government interference in the Conservative Party leadership race. So I said, oh, okay. So let me read what it says where it's not redacted. That was the only point of reference. So before I made any public comments, because I felt it was incumbent on me as someone with top secret security clearance, to the extent that it was legal for me to do so, not to be muzzled, quite the contrary, to be able to be certain that I was absolutely not exposing any of our security assets to any risk, to work through the information I had and to say to experts in security, is it okay if I say that having read this report, I don't think there's any allegation or intelligence or evidence of proactive efforts by any currently sitting member of parliament in the House of Commons to betray Canada in the interest of another country, that nobody here is a traitor. That's what I said. I stand by that. We do know there was a former member of parliament. I think we should have an investigation of that individual. And again, as Mr. Alistair McGregor's made this point recently in this committee, I guess it was last Friday, it's really important. There's a distinction between intelligence and evidence. And to the extent that you can have a security operative somewhere around the world who says, we've heard blah, 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 but blah, blah, blah doesn't become evidence against an individual unless it's tested in court and it's actually pursued and it's actually researched. It becomes intelligence that's worth knowing. But I was very clearly warned by the officials in the security establishment before I get a press conference. If you say this part of the report out loud, it may look innocuous to you to share that, but don't share it because it could expose one of our intelligence assets actually to potentially being killed. So I took it very seriously to avoid saying anything that violated the Security of Information Act. I don't think that means I'm muzzled. Again, I urge Mr. Poilievre to ask for, you don't get it as of right, you go through quite a process, but I urge Mr. Poilievre to ask for top secret security clearance with the goal that all of us as federal party leaders from parties that have loads of differences with each other, but as individuals, we're Canadians first, political party leaders second. And if we were able to be on a level playing field where we all have top secret security clearance, and we could meet in one of those windowless rooms with nothing but other people with top secret security clearance, we could actually have an honest discussion about what do we do to demonstrate to the rest of the world and to all Canadians that we are a unified front, no daylight between us, in our commitment to end foreign interference in Canada. In our elections, that's what Madam Justice Hoag's inquiry mandate covers. And in this extremely serious set of allegations that the RCMP have uncovered a criminal network operating within Canada, taking instructions from another government and threatening, and in fact, having already experienced homicides in Canada, which are being investigated by the RCMP. This could not be more serious. And to the extent that it's fallen into a partisan debate, that's unfortunate. But that's Mr. Poilievre's fault. He's the only one who can ask for his own top secret security clearance. So this will cease to be a political football. I say that knowing that my comment will be seen as partisan by my friends in the Conservative Party, from Medicine Hat, Cardston, Warner, and from Kildone and St. Paul's. I mean, God knows I think of you guys as my friends. I'm trying to be as fair and honest as I can here. I beg of you that Mr. Poilievre should be encouraged by his own caucus to ask for top secret security clearance. I wrote him back in June and asked him to do so. He's yet to reply to my letter. That's okay. I know he's busy, but it's important that we're all on the same page and able to deal with this. I would just like to say that I completely support the motion before you. I would vote for it if I were a member of committee and able to vote for this. If we can create, which I do support, a Canada-India special committee, I would like to ask other colleagues around this table to urge their parties to allow the Green Party to have a seat in that committee. I think we could be useful. We work hard. And as I said, we try to bring more light than heat. So I was really pleased last night. I think it was at 1 minute to midnight when the foreign affairs critic for the New Democratic Party, the honorable member for Edmonton Strathcona, said that she would support allowing a Green Party member of parliament to have a seat on a committee I do hope will get established. I hope whatever party said no, and I wasn't in a position to see who said no to unanimous consent motion, so I won't speak to that because I don't have direct knowledge. But whoever said no next time around, just let UC take place, but please rewrite the motion so that there's a seat on that committee for a Green Party MP. Lastly, I just want to refer to the allegations that we started this discussion this morning with the allegations in today's Globe and Mail. I think it needs, I'm not comfortable at all with the idea that Natalie Drouin or the Deputy Minister for Global Affairs Canada, that they would have shared information with the Washington Post before Canadians knew that information. But I do note that representatives and spokespeople for both our National Security Advisor and for the Deputy Minister at Global Affairs Canada have denied that they gave briefings to the Washington Post. I do note that the story in the Washington Post for October 18th falls some days after, of course, October 14th, when the RCMP did a press conference. I do know that from the briefing I received from Madame Drouin and also from the new head of CSIS, Mr. Rogers, on October 16th, I did ask specifically, did the leader of the official opposition get this briefing? And they said yes, but they were unable to share as many details with him as they had just shared with me because he doesn't have his top secret security clearance. I think it's very important. Again, I support this motion from Alistair McGregor. I think it's very important that we all encourage Mr. Poilievre to get his top secret security clearance, because otherwise it leaves a cloud over the question of how much foreign interference was there in the Conservative Party leadership race. But I do hope that this committee, when it gets back to the business of the discussion on the motion to have a significant study calling before this committee as witnesses many of the people whose names I've just mentioned, that the question of this allegation that once again someone with security clearance sent information to a reporter, that needs to be investigated, because we can't be, as a country, respected in the world that takes intelligence and information shared with intelligence agencies from other countries. They need to know that top secret information obtained through the work of intelligence assets around the world is protected. Otherwise, we could find ourselves frozen out of key information that we do need. And I don't think there's anything more serious than this. Obviously, I think climate change is a serious threat imminently. But when I talk about our obligations as parliamentarians, our obligations is to ensure that Canadian laws are respected. That includes respect for the Security of Information Act. Again, I don't feel muzzled, and Melissa, I don't feel angry or upset or any of the words you use. I'm honored to be able to play a role that I hope is helpful to Canadians in saying what I can talk about, what I can't talk about, and why. And none of the reasons put forward by Mr. Poilievre so far have impressed experts like Wesley Wark or Mr. McFadden. They don't make sense. Of asking for top secret security clearance, an opportunity we would not have had but for the report of David Johnston, back to where I started, is at this point an obligation of Mr. Poilievre's. I don't think it's a choice. I believe he is duty bound to pursue that so that we can unify as political leadership in this country, regardless how much we may disagree on other points. As Canadians, we must be unified in shutting out any foreign interference in our electoral processes, but even more so in the day-to-day lives of Canadians who must not be subjected to extortions or threats or actual experiences of physical violence, including death. This is no place for partisan politics. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. May. So we have overrun our time slot at the moment. I'm going to ask if the committee